I fell in love with my neighbor's wife, but I think there's something wrong with her. I've never been a person who's kept many close relationships. It's never been my nature to let people into my life. I've always taken stock in being an observer, getting to know people from a distance. This trait is what led me to become so enmeshed in Monica's life. Monica Stevens and her husband Dylan were my neighbors and my landlords at my new apartment. I had just moved to the city from my small town, mostly to find work, but it didn't hurt that there were many more people watching opportunities here than at my previous residence. My apartment was not lavish by any stretch, but it was perfect for me. I lived on the top floor, a view of the rooftop garden from my kitchen, and my bedroom window was directly across from the Stevens kitchen window, as they lived just two doors down. Although I tried, I could never get a view of their bedroom, as their thick, blackout curtains were shut tightly at all hours. For the first week after I moved in, I learned the Stevens routine. Each morning, Monica would already be at the kitchen table by the time I woke up at 6. She'd sit, her chin propped up against her palm, head buried in her book, and long blonde curls falling in front of her face. It was so cute. When Dylan got up, I could tell she stiffened at his presence. Immediately, he'd begin to berate her. I could see the spittle fly from his mouth as he slammed her book shut, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door. This was an almost daily occurrence. If he was not screaming in her face, he would sit across from her silently, eat a bowl of cereal, and disappear out the door. When he left, he would not come back again until dinner. I don't know what he would do during the day, but I never cared to find out. He was probably cheating on Monica, that pig. Plus, if I followed him, it would be less time I could spend with my beautiful girl. Hour after hour, Monica would sit at the kitchen table, unmoving. Poor thing was paralyzed with fear. I hadn't known her that long, but I knew I could never let her stay with that asshole. When Dylan got home, he walked in and picked her up from her chair and take her to the bedroom. I could see his insincere apologies, just saying sorry in hopes he'd get laid. They come out an hour later, him placing her back into her wheelchair. I'd watch Monica sit with her back to my window while her doting husband cooked dinner. He cooked in seeming silence, not speaking to her or even acknowledging her presence. It baffled me how that troll could treat a woman of that caliber with such carelessness. Although I could never get a clear view of her face, I could tell she was beautiful, shy, and that he didn't love her like I did. He was so controlling. His wife never left the apartment complex, let alone feel safe enough to even move from the kitchen table during the day. The only time she could come out was Saturday morning, when would I see her on the rooftop garden. I knew she wanted me to save her. After observing their routine for around 2 weeks, at that point I could pinpoint exactly when I could corner Dylan. The morning I planned to confront him, there was a change in the usual routine. While Dylan was in the middle of his screaming session, he struck the back of Monica's head. This sent her forehead slamming down onto their wooden kitchen table. Let me tell you, this set me off. The rest of the routine remained unchanged, as at 7 a.m. exactly he would leave their apartment and head for the elevator. Following him, I left at 7:01, so I could catch that elevator right before it closed. Wanting to seem nonchalant, I smiled when I walked into the elevator and introduced myself, stating that I was sorry for not formally introducing myself since moving in. I hadn't interacted with him directly when I had signed the lease, just his property manager. He gave me the side eye, so I confidently stuck out my hand to shake his. He grabbed it finally, his tarnished silver wedding ring cold on my hand, and said, "Yeah, I'm the landlord, Dylan." I told him I had noticed his wife's affinity for gardening and asked if she'd like some company next time. I know, a little early to get to talking about Monica, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I couldn't spend any more time exchanging pleasantries with this asshole either. That's when something strange happened. He turned to me and grabbed my forearm, squeezing so tight that it was painful. He shoved me forcibly against the elevator wall and said, "Listen, I know you've been stalking my wife. She wants you to leave her alone." The elevator door dinged and opened. He let go of my arm and walked straight out without another word, straight through the complex doors to his car and drove off. I stood shocked. What the hell was that? But I had gotten what I came for, and that was all that mattered. The whole "leave her alone" was such an obvious lie. It confirmed to me that she needed my help. Dylan was becoming more unhinged by the day, and this episode in the elevator was proof. I went straight back up to my apartment, already thinking of what I was going to do on Saturday morning when she got to that garden. It was already Friday evening by the time Dylan got back from his daily escapades. I dreamed of her that night, about finally turning her around, seeing that gorgeous face that was no longer hiding from Dylan, professing my love and running away together. We'd get a cottage so she could garden but live near the city so we could watch people together. We'd both be free and happy. Saturday morning came, and I woke up early to prepare my things. When Dylan woke up, he went immediately to find Monica in the kitchen. He lit into her first thing. It was too muffled to hear exactly what he was saying, but loud enough that I could hear through their closed window. I could see her distress. She couldn't even lift her head to defend herself. This poor, beaten down woman was counting on me. But it wasn't too much longer now. Dylan forcefully grabbed her wheelchair and wheeled her out of the apartment, heading for the roof. I watched as he dumped her there, screaming a final time, saying, "You can just rot out the hair. I don't even care anymore." Dylan disgusted me. I wished I could rush up there and take her away right then. However, I knew I had to wait for Dylan to depart if I wanted to avoid a confrontation. Half an hour later, I approached the elevator so that I could reach the rooftop garden. As the elevator rose, I took a deep breath. Was I going to do this? Confess my love to this married woman and propose that we run away from her abusive husband together? I guess so, because a moment later I was stepping out from the elevator and into the small hallway that ended with the final obstacle between me and my love. As I approached the door that led on top of the roof, I felt the hot summer air begin to seeping in. I turned the knob and stepped onto the bright roof. There she was, Monica. That silky blonde hair was instantly recognizable. It had fallen and covered her face slightly so that she couldn't quite see me approach. I walked over slowly as I didn't want to startle her, but then my emotions took over. I grabbed her shoulder, spun her around, and closed my eyes right before I professed my love. But I got no response. I mean, Nothing.
On an
Nada.
unidentified
Screw
beach
you.
between
Not
Aligarh
an I
and
love you
Narrator.
too. Silence.
4 years ago,
I opened
after
my
we
eyes,
finished our
expecting to
final
meet the eyes
exams,
of a
my
beautiful
friends
woman.
and I decided to
Instead,
take a
I
beach
gagged.
vacation
She
so
had
we
no
would chill
eyes, they
out
were
and
gone.
relax. There were
No
4 of us
eyebrows,
all together.
either. They
We
were
packed all
replaced
our
with
luggage
thick,
into my
black
friend's
stitches
car
that
and
held
set
her
off on our
eyelids
trip.
together. Her eyes were
Our plan
completely
was to
sewn
save money
shut.
by sleeping on the
My
beach
eyes
instead of wasting
traveled
money
down
on
to
a
her
hotel.
nose. She
We wanted
had
to visit a
a
new
maggot
beach every
hanging
night.
out of
Since
her
we didn't know
right
much
nostril,
about the
and it
beaches in the
turned to
area,
crawl
we
into
started
her
asking the
left one.
locals. One
She
beach in
was
particular
a
caught our
repulsing
attention.
pale color,
The locals
with
told
burst
us it was
veins
always
glittering her
totally
skin.
deserted.
Then
We
down to
wanted
her
a
mouth,
quiet place,
it was
so
sewn
we
as
decided to
well,
spend the
and
first
her
night
lips were
there.
gone,
By the
ripped off
time we
her
found the
face.
beach,
Her
it was
mouth was
already
sewn
after
into a
7
line.
p.m.
No smile, no
We
frown,
parked our car
completely
near the
straight
road,
and
and as
emotionless.
we walked down
Beyond
to the
that, her
beach,
legs were
it felt
completely
as
gone.
if we had
I was
landed on a
expecting her to
different
have been
planet.
intact.
The sand
I
was
mean, I
black,
knew she was
and
in
the
a
water was
wheelchair, but
glittering
her
in the
legs
moonlight.
looked like they had been
We built a
sawed
small
off.
fire
They
in
were
the sand and
jaggedly
sat around,
rotting, not
eating some
being
snacks and drinking
cauterized
cans of
of
soda.
anything. I
One of
couldn't
my
look
friends had a
anymore. I
flashlight
ran to
with
the
him,
hallway leading
so
back
we
to the
decided to
elevator,
explore the beach.
vomiting once
As we
I
were
had
walking
gotten the
along
door
the
shut
water,
behind
we
me.
heard some
I ran
strange
to my
noises
apartment where
coming
I
from the
dead
water.
bolted
At
the
first,
door
we
behind
thought
me
it
and
must be
sunk
some
down
kind of
into a
animal,
fetal position,
but as we
sobbing.
listened, it
I
seemed to be
felt
coming from the water.
indescribable
One of
loss,
my friends
anger,
said
and
he
fear.
thought he heard
What
someone
had he
calling his
done to my
name.
beautiful future wife?
At
He
that moment, I
mutilated her?
glanced over my
And he thought
shoulder
I
and
was
saw
going to
something in
let
the
him get
water
away with
that
this?
almost
I had no
scared the
weapons
life out of
beside a
me.
massive hammer
In the dim
from an
light,
old
I could
toolbox
barely
I
make
had
it out,
under my
but
sink.
it appeared
I
to be
stalked my
a
way
woman's
to
head
the Stevens
floating
apartment
above the
and broke the
surface.
doorknob off
As I
with the
watched,
hammer.
she
Kicking
opened
the
her
door
mouth
in, I
and I
wanted to
let out a
avenge my
yell.
love. The
My
apartment
friend
had
quickly
an
shone his
atmosphere
torch
so
at the
grotesque,
spot,
so
but before
depraved,
the light could
so
reach
much more
her, she
disturbing than I
disappeared
could
below the
have
water.
ever
We all
imagined.
heard the
I
sound.
walked into the
We
door and
waited there
smelled
for a long
rotting
time,
flesh
but she
seeping from the
never
walls.
reemerged.
The only light came from the
We were
singular
creeped out
kitchen
by
window,
this,
the
so
one
we
I had
returned
stared
to our
into
car and
so many
decided to go to
times,
sleep.
the one I had
My
never
friend and I
imagined
slept
would
in the
hold
car
this
while the other
horror
three slept on
lurking
the beach
in the
beside the
spots I
fire.
couldn't see.
Around 1
Right by
a.m.,
the
we
window,
were awoken
just
by the
out of the
sound of
view,
one of our
I could
friends
see from my
shouting and
apartment
yelling.
was a meat
When
hook,
we ran
and
down to
there
the
in the
beach,
dim
he told that
apartment
he had
hung
seen a black
Monica's
figure
left leg.
floating
He
across
was
the
going to
beach,
eat her
and when he
leg.
looked
I
towards the
nearly
water,
puked
he saw
on
a
the
woman's
kitchen
head
table.
peering at
I
him.
could bring
As soon
myself
as
to
he
leave
started
even
yelling,
though
she
I
had
was frightened.
disappeared.
No
This
matter how
really
much my
freaked
brain said to
everyone
run,
out,
my feet
and the two
kept taking
friends
me
who
further
had been
into the
sleeping on the
apartment.
beach
I entered
decided it would
I
be
entered
safer
their
to spend the
bedroom.
night in the car with
Dried
us.
splatter stained
What
the
happened
walls and
next
floors.
was the
It looked
most
fairly
frightening
faded. How
thing
long
of
ago
all.
had he killed her?
Around
I knew it
3 a.m.,
hadn't been
we
long,
were
but I
woken up
believed that the whole
again by
time
loud
I had
screams
been
and
living
cries for help.
in this
We
apartment,
realized
she had
that
been
there was
dead.
only three
I
of us
gazed into my
left in the
apartment
car.
window as I
One of our
re-entered
friends
the
was
kitchen,
missing. We
imagining how
raced down
untainted
to the
my mind
beach
had
and
been
found him
just hours
rushing
ago.
around in the
I began
water.
to
He
panic.
was
I
screaming in
wanted to call the
terror.
police.
We
I
dived
had
in and managed to drag him out
impenetrable
before he drowned.
evidence
He
against
was numb
Dylan.
and
Not
still in
only was
shock.
Monica slumped over
After a
on the
while,
roof,
he
but his
calmed down
apartment was a
and was
striking and
able to tell
completely
us what had happened.
incriminating crime scene.
He said he
Before
had
I
woken up
attempted to get
and needed
help,
to go to the
I knew I had
toilet.
to get
So
Monica
he went
somewhere
down to the
safe.
beach and
I
started
started my way
peeing
out of the
into
kitchen,
the water.
making my way back to the
All
front
of a
door, but
sudden,
then a
we saw
voice
a
rang
woman's
out
head
from just
floating above the
outside the front
surface.
door. What the hell?
Before he
Dylan
had
yelled.
a chance
He
to
broke
react,
the routine.
he felt
I had
someone
no
grab
chance
his
of
legs
running. I
tightly,
ducked back
and he
into the
was pulled
bedroom and
into the
slid
water.
quietly into the
He said that
attached
whatever
bathroom.
it was very
I could
strong.
hear his thudding
He was unable to
footsteps
break
grow
free of its
closer and
grasp,
closer as he
and
threatened.
as he was
I have a
drowning,
gun.
he
Whatever
heard it
creep is in their
laughing.
hair, I have a gun.
gun.
We were all so
It
freaked
was
out
time for me
by
to
his
avenge
story
Monica.
that
I
we
heard him
immediately went
enter the
back to the
bedroom.
car and
I
drove to the
gripped the
nearest
hammer in
village.
my hand,
When we got
charged
there,
out of
we
the
had
bathroom,
breakfast in
and
a local
swung.
hotel
I hit him
and
directly
asked some
in
of the
the
people
left
from the
temple.
village if they
He
knew
screamed,
anything about the
contorting
beach.
with pain. I
They
dropped the
told us
hammer
that the
and
beach was
fled back to my
notorious and
apartment,
had a reputation
adrenaline
for being haunted.
carrying me
Many
the
people
whole
had
way there.
mysteriously
All I could
disappeared
focus
or
on
drowned
was
in the
getting his blood
waters.
off of me. When the
After all,
police searched the
the
apartment,
strange
they were
things
in
they had
shock at
experienced,
the scene.
people
It
stopped
wasn't me
visiting
that
the
called
beach,
them, but
and that
another
was
tenant
why it
down the
was
hall.
deserted.
By the
They
time I
told us
was
that
finished washing
9 years
myself
ago,
and
a local
disposing of
girl
my
had
bloodied
been out
clothes,
walking on the beach
Monica
when
had
she
been
was
found by
assaulted by
police.
an unknown
Coroners
attacker.
came and wrapped
He
up
abused
her
her
frail
and cut
body.
off her head
They lifted
while
her
she
up
was
and
still
she was
alive.
gone. I didn't even get to say
That happened
goodbye.
over
2
30
days
years
later,
ago,
I went to her
and ever
closed
since that
casket
terrible
funeral.
murder,
It was a
people who
fairly
visited the
publicized
beach
affair,
would feel
being how
something in the
brutally
water
tortured
pulling them
she had
in.
been. I stood in
Villagers
the
who went
back,
fishing
and
on the
after
beach
the burial,
often
I
reported
left,
seeing a
my car
ghostly
packed with
apparition,
everything I owned.
like a
I
woman's
left the city.
severed head,
I still dream
floating
of
above
her,
the
of dancing in the
surface
kitchen,
of the
of
water.
how our lives could have been,
Even today,
of her
the
beautiful
memory
stone
of this
face.
incident
Monica,
still
you're going to
sends
love my new
shivers
place.
down my
It's the
spine,
cottage
and it
we've
made my
always
friends
wanted.
and I believe
I
that
can't wait
ghosts
to pick you
really
up soon.
do exist.
See you then.